There we go. I just had to figure out the technical things of this, Sap. You would think I'd be good at this point, but welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. I don't know. Maybe it's working with kids all day, Sap, that I come home and I do the podcast and my brain is just fried.
That will happen. Exactly. Yeah, the young kids will get you a little disoriented, and you have to kind of get your bearings straight. But we're all good.
Yeah, we are all good. Somebody who's not all good, which thank you for the pro assist there, Sap, is Draymond Green, who is suspended indefinitely and will be suspended at least for the next 3 weeks, which I guess is indefinite, as he's seeking counseling. They haven't been that specific about what kind of counseling. I would assume anger management or something like that. But if you hadn't seen the clip already, this was as a result of his second physical altercation this year. This time it was against the Phoenix Suns and Joseph Nurkic, where Draymond sort of wound up with a back fist, something that you would see in UFC, not in an NBA game. And if you remember earlier in the season, he put a sleeper hold on Rudy Gobert. So Draymond may have a future in the WWE or an MMA, but the NBA is not going to tolerate this, as this has gone on for years and years. Including the playoffs last year, Sap, where he famously kind of stomped on Domantas Sabonis' chest. So, Sap, overreaction, appropriate reaction by the NBA, and what's the future hold for Draymond Green?
I think it's the appropriate reaction. I mean, because it's something that's happened, and for several years now. Obviously, he's the bad boy of basketball, and a player who probably should have been playing in the 80s or 90s. He could have been on the bad boy Pistons or on the Celtics of the 80s. They had a lot of physical players. Throughout the 90s, there were a lot of physical style of play, like with the Knicks and Bulls, and that's where Draymond Green should have played. The league is not about that now. It's still physical, the league, because the players are just so much more athletic and bigger and stronger, but they don't play at the same level they did, say, in the 80s and 90s. And I think that is pretty much a good thing. But that seems to be about the right punishment. Indefinitely is always kind of murky. But from what Shams is saying, it's going to be 3 more weeks of counseling. Maybe comes back the middle of January. We'll see where he's at, where the Golden State Warriors are at. And now his last 2 episodes, is he starting to attack foreign players because he looks at them as being weak? It does appear that that's kind of his target at
Right.
some point, right? Although, what was it, last year in the playoffs, or 2 years ago when they get Sabonis, another foreign-born player. 2 years ago against Memphis, it was not a foreign or European player. It was Dylan Brooks that he kind of got in with it a little bit. And, there's two guys that kind of deserve each other. So, look, he's just gone off the rails too many times. And he's always been a really good player I've always liked, because he's a guy who fills in the gaps beautifully. He's kind of like a Dennis Rodman in terms of his skill set. Not quite the rebounder of Dennis Rodman, but a great defender, superb passer, smart player, knows all about spacing, great at setting picks for Curry and Thompson, like the perfect guy to fit in with those two great players. But now I think it's gone to the point where he's hurting his team by getting these suspensions and causing a lot of distractions. So hopefully he gets the help he needs. The only issue I'll have with this is that oftentimes I've seen this in other sports, and maybe even in basketball, but I know this is probably before your time, but in the 80s in baseball, Gary Gaetti was an all-star third baseman, and Darryl Strawberry, of course, a great outfielder. And they both had like substance abuse issues while they were getting drunk and drinking and doing all of that stuff. They were sensational baseball players. Well, they went and, found tranquility and kind of got a control of their personal life. And they were never quite the same player, because it almost felt like they played with a lot of anger. Like, so if Draymond Green all of a sudden is at peace with himself and isn't this angry a-hole on the court, does he cease being a valuable member of the Golden State Warriors? That's something to look out for, because that can't happen with people.
Yeah, you obviously, you have to find the happy medium with his playing style. He's not much of a threat offensively anymore. He's averaging below 10 points a game this season. Not that he's ever been, that much of a threat to score the basketball. It's the things he does. Other than that, like you said, set up his teammates, rebound, play defense. But yeah, where he's valuable is being that sort of enforcer role. And so you have to walk the fine line between maintaining that where you are valuable, but also not crossing the line. And that seems to be the part that he's really struggled with, especially as I think as his skills have diminished, and I'm not saying he's not a valuable player anymore because he still is, but he's not in his prime anymore at all. So as his skills have diminished, I think he's shaded more towards that over physicality to sort of make up for it. And I think the results are what you see, where he just makes plays that have no place in a basketball court in the NBA. And the league is rightfully so taking it seriously because player safety needs to be paramount. And besides that, too, it's just not a good look from a PR perspective from the league to have one of your players constantly in trouble for clocking other players, and it makes it look like it's not an unserious league with players who can't control their emotions at all. And so the NBA doesn't want to have that reputation. And so for that reason, and for the player safety reason, they said, Draymond, you need to walk away right now. We can't have you on a basketball court. We can't trust you to not do this stuff until you get some counseling. And so obviously that's what, the league is going to have to decide now when they feel like he's ready to come back. As far as the Warriors are concerned, they're not playing very well with or without him this season. They're 12-14. They wouldn't even be in the play-in tournament if the season ended today. So I don't know where they stand on wanting to get him back or not right now, Sap.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to bring up too, Jet, and those are all really great points, like how good is Golden State going to be? Can they find one last hurrah with that unit of Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green? It appears that Andrew Wiggins isn't all that engaged. Although 2 years ago in the finals, I thought he was the second best player on the Warriors behind only Steph Curry. Sure. The young players haven't really developed, right? Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman turned out to be a total bust. He was the second overall pick, and within 2 years, traded to the Pistons. So, they haven't been able to bridge the old to the new. And that's always a key in trying to keep something going at a dynastic level. So it's going to be interesting to see what they can do going forward. I also want to push back a little bit on Steph Curry and Steve Kerr. We hear about Steve Kerr being this great leader and Steph Curry being this great leader, but neither one of them can seem to control Draymond Green. Like, I think if Steph Curry was this leader,
what happened with Stephen A. Smith and Steve Kerr.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that type of stuff. But also the fact that, Steph Curry is considered, along with LeBron, the two best leaders in the NBA. Well, sure. Part of being a leader is controlling your teammates. Like,
definitely.
And you can even look at LeBron, who wasn't able to control Kyrie Irving, but Kyrie Irving was a little bit different than Draymond Green. Kyrie Irving just is in his final year with Cleveland, third year together with LeBron, was very aloof, wasn't talking to his teammates, extremely moody, immature. That's one thing. Draymond, I don't think is all that, although he did cold cock Jordan Poole last year in training camp, who is no longer with Golden State, is now with Washington. But my point being, if Steph Curry's this great leader, can't he control Draymond Green? Maybe we've overrated the leadership ability of Steph Curry.
Yeah, I saw Stephen A. Smith was saying something similar, and Steve Kerr got upset about it. And I think Stephen A. made a good point, saying that if we're holding everybody to the same standard as LeBron would be getting killed for this right now. And
sure.
if anybody's listening to the show, I'm not a LeBron guy. I'm not defending him at every turn. I try to criticize him whenever I can. But I think Stephen A. and you here, Sap, are right on the money in that that is certainly a role of leadership. It's not like this was Draymond's first offense. This was Draymond's 21st offense. So what annoys me about Steve Kerr is that and I think Stephen A. was saying a little bit about this too, Kendrick Perkins was getting more into this, is that he feels very comfortable calling out other players and other teams for what he feels they do wrong. Not even talking about the politics stuff that he weighs into, because I appreciate that. But, a couple of years ago, he said, Marcus Smart broke the code when he dove on a ball that was a basketball play, but he never seems to criticize Draymond Green for, stomping on somebody or cold cocking somebody or putting somebody in a sleeper hold. And I think that's, really hypocritical. If you're going to call out other players for doing things that are far less serious than what Draymond's done, and you're not going to do it on your own team, then that's not really showing leadership. The real leadership is holding your own team accountable.
Exactly. Right. Because the coach is supposed to be the ultimate leader of the team, and then the best player oftentimes is the best leader of the team. And that's all we've ever heard about Steph Curry. Great leader. Well, he's not showing any leadership ability here. Maybe Draymond's just beyond being led. He's a guy who's been on 4 championship teams. wildly popular on his podcast, is pretty much set to at some point join the TNT crew when either Shaq or Barkley retire. He makes the most
they're not
sense of any
scared he's going to
current
beat them
player.
up in the when they're doing a show.
Well, good luck with that. If he decides to go after Barkley or Shaq, I think my money would be on Shaq and Barkley, even though they're much older than Draymond Green. But we both like Draymond Green. I like the fact that he's opinionated, good sense of humor. At times he's a bully with other players, oftentimes with his own teammates, including Kevin Durant. The biggest reason Kevin Durant wanted to get the hell out of Golden State after 3 years was Draymond Green. I think that there was a lot of friction and tension between those two. And he also kind of does this a lot with the media, like, don't ask me questions, you guys didn't play. Well, you know what, Draymond? That's what their jobs are, is to ask you questions. And you know what? Don't do a podcast because you're not trained to do a podcast.
Right.
Now you're infringing on our territory where, we've had to put in blood, sweat, and tears to start doing these types of things where you're able to do it as a player. God bless you. We'd like to hear from you, but, don't be holier than thou and judgmental on everyone else because you happen to play in the NBA. And let's face facts. If Draymond Green was drafted by Orlando in the second round and went to the playoffs 3 or 4 times and got bounced in the first or second round 3 or 4 times, we wouldn't really even know who the hell he was. I mean,
Sure,
he's very fortunate that he was on a Golden State team with 2 phenomenal shooters, and then they added a third one in Kevin Durant, and they started showing up in the finals. He was a key component on that, but he wasn't the key component on those teams.
Oh, without a doubt. And I mean, when you have the level of team success that the Warriors had, players start overvaluing their reason for that success sometimes, especially role players. And Draymond's a little, he's been an all-star multiple times. He's probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. So he's calling him role player is not really fair, but I'm saying that I think that when you achieve that level of success, you start saying, well, they couldn't have done this without me. And then that sort of leads to you thinking that you are more important to that team's success than Kevin Durant, which obviously wasn't true, and, forced Kevin Durant out of there. Think if you had blind polled all the Warriors players for the next 5 years, who would you rather have on this team, Kevin Durant or Draymond Green, he would have lost unanimously. So, it's partially that. I think that also rubs people the wrong way, that he maybe overestimates his impact or ability. Again, not saying that he hasn't had a marvelous career, because he has, but he's not at the level of Steph Curry or even Klay Thompson or Kevin Durant, certainly. So I think that's something else. Playing with a chip on your shoulder is one thing. Being delusional is something different.
If we're going to compare him to a football player, I'll go back 15, 20 years, and I know this guy was one of your favorite players of all time, Rodney Harrison. Right? I think somewhat
he's
a similar
my
player.
favorite Patriot of all time.
Well, that's not a surprise. I picked that one, and I didn't know that, but I know you well enough to know that would be your favorite Patriot of all time. Mine would be Tom Brady. I go for the guy that's in the debate, or the
so
greatest
original,
of all time.
Seth. Very original.
I don't fool around. Yeah, Brady, LeBron, Barry Bonds, Mario Lemieux. Pick them all. I love them all. Aaron Rodgers, obviously my favorite football player of all time, but he reminds me a little bit of Rodney Harrison. Rodney Harrison, I know everyone talks about he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't think he really qualifies for that. I think he was All-Pro once, Pro Bowl twice. Like, that's not enough to get you in the Hall of Fame. But again, he was a key component on a team that won 2 Super Bowls. And he had a great personality, and he's outstanding in the media. But let's face facts, was a very dirty player. He was the most fined player in the history of the league. He's been surpassed by other guys because the fines have just gone up so much. But at the time of his retirement, the most fined player in the history of the NFL, Rodney Harrison, Draymond Green, somewhat similar, and their fan bases love them, right? I mean, if Draymond Green played on the Celtics, Celtic fans would love him. His number would be retired. They loved Marcus Smart, and this guy's just a better version of Marcus Smart. Obviously, Patriot fans, like you said, your favorite all-time Patriot, Rodney Harrison or Teddy Bruschi, guys like that. Harrison, to me, very similar to Draymond Green, and Harrison at some point kind of went a bit over the edge. And again, in that sport, you kind of not necessarily support it, but you can understand it. It's the ultimate physical sport. This sport is not supposed to be that way. And he becomes such a dirty player where, he's going to hurt someone and end someone's career with a chokehold or a punch or, shoving someone from behind when they're in a prone position going in for a layup. It's dangerous. And he's going to need to get some help. But I do think if he gets the help he needs and he kind of conquers whatever the demons are, he's not going to be the same player because he's not a guy that you can just roll out there and say, okay, just do it on skill level alone. Like he has to play with that edge. He to me will be just a average player at best if he's this mellow kind of chill guy. That's not going to work for his type of game.
So Sap, does he stick around in Golden State, or are they now try to just move on from him?
His contract is problematic yet. He signed a 4-year, $100 million contract. I mean, I know they throw tens of millions of dollars around like nickels and dimes in the NBA, but that's still pretty substantial. And how many places could he go? Immediately, I think of the Lakers, right?
Well, because he's got a good relationship with LeBron.
Right. And there's the ultimate leader who probably could control him more so than anyone else. But is Golden State going to trade Draymond Green to the Lakers and maybe help the Lakers win a championship?
I don't think so. And also, Sep, does he help the Lakers so much right now? Because, we talk about LeBron is best when you surround him with shooters. I mean, Draymond's not shooting terribly this year, but I would not want him shooting the ball regularly. From three, he's shooting 43% on the season. That's pretty good. Career-wise, he's a 31% three-point shooter. That's not very good. So, I don't know that he would help. They're already very good defensively. I don't know that Draymond would help them.
No, they need shooting. I mean, I think that's what you need with LeBron and Anthony Davis being your two best players is perimeter shooters. And although Draymond Green's numbers are better this year, he's not a very good 3-point shooter. He's just been better this year than normal. Also, would you want Draymond Green around Anthony Davis? Like I could see Anthony Davis, who's kind of a sensitive guy, kind of wired like Kevin Durant.
I wouldn't want Jimmy Butler around Anthony Davis either.
Exactly. Yeah, there's certain guys that shouldn't be around other guys. Some are puppies, some are dogs, and sometimes dogs get a little too aggressive with puppies.
Sap, it took Karl Anthony Towns like 6 years to recover from playing with one season with Jimmy Butler.
PTSD with Jimmy Butler. Yeah, it's not all roses and rainbows with Jimmy Butler. He's probably not an easy guy to play with, and I'm sure Draymond Green isn't. Kevin Durant, after 3 years, said, "Let me get the hell out of here." And that's one of the all-time great players, one of the most talented players ever. So I don't know if I'd want Anthony Davis exposed to Draymond Green. I think with Anthony Davis, you kind of have to handle him a certain way. Like I wouldn't want Draymond Green with Jason Tatum.
No,
I think Jason Tatum, I wouldn't want that at all. I think Jaylen Brown would probably butt heads with him a little bit because Jaylen Brown's a little bit more forceful, but the Celtics aren't going to get Draymond Green. They don't need him. The Warriors aren't going to trade him to the Celtics. They probably won't trade him to the Lakers. They're probably just going to have to live with him because he still remains a fan favorite. And, you're kind of stuck with him at this point.
Yeah, you may be. So I don't know what the Warriors do. They're obviously, because they screwed up some of these draft picks, they're now trying to figure out how they can sort of salvage these last few years of top tier Steph Curry play. And this situation with Draymond doesn't make it any easier. But Sap, at least they're not they're not having a good season, but at least they're not in the dregs of the league. At least they're not the Detroit Pistons, Sap, who as of this moment sit at 2-25 on the season. That is a .074 winning percentage. They have lost 24 games in a row. Sap, do you happen to know offhand? I just looked it up, what the consecutive record is for losing games in a season.
I believe it's 26.
It is 26, set by the 2010-11 Cavaliers, so after LeBron left, and the 2013-14 Philadelphia 76ers, who were in the midst of the process. Both those teams lost 26 games combined. The Pistons only 2 away from that dubious record in their next couple of games. If I can pull it up here, they play the Jazz in 2 days. That's that's winnable. So maybe it ends there. And then they play after the Jazz, they play Brooklyn back to back, and then the Celtics. So I don't think they're going to get that Celtics game in, but if they're going to try to be a team, it should be the Jazz, and then they have a chance to set the record, the bad record against Brooklyn, if they can't get past Utah. Sap, they're not the only awful team in the NBA, though. We're going to talk about the Pistons and more at length in a second, because the Wizards are not too far behind. They're 4-22 on the year. And in the Western Conference, the Trailblazers and the Grizzlies are both 6-19. But last place in the Western Conference are the Spurs. They who have Victor Wembanyama. They are 4-21 on the season, Sap. Just before we react, to give you just a sense, take all those numbers into consideration. The worst record of all time is held by the 73 Philadelphia 76ers. They finished 9-73. After that, it was also a different 76ers team, 2016. They finished 10-72. The Mavericks in 93 and the Nuggets in 98 both finished 11-71. All these teams, Sap, are on pace to finish right around there or below. The Pistons are on pace to win 6 games.
6-76. That's what they're on pace for. That's like 1 win a month, pretty much, right? So good luck if you're a Pistons fan. And, oh, by the way, the Pistons have the highest paid coach in the NBA in Monty Williams. And the Spurs have the second highest paid coach in Greg Popovich. So I guess coaching doesn't mean anything in the NBA if you don't have the players. And the thing about Detroit is I thought they've drafted pretty well, right?
Like, I think
Cade
Detroit and
Cunningham.
San Antonio both have decent rosters. This is
Right.
ridiculous. It shouldn't be
Not
this
bad. And if they're tanking, what exactly are they tanking for? Like, I understood last year you're tanking for Victor Wembanyama. Like, who's the presumptive number 1 pick in the 2024 draft? It's not a player at that level.
No,
so
not yet. I mean,
there's a kid
from USC, Isaiah Collier, and then there's another 7-footer from France. But this is not considered a very good draft. I mean, it's considered okay, but it's not considered game changing.
Like, what is the problem with these teams? The rosters aren't this bad. Look, they're not playoff contenders. We get that. But you would also think in the NBA, there's some soft spots in the schedule.
I thought the Pistons were a fringe playoff contender at the start of the season.
I did too. I put out my win totals before the season, and I think they were like 28.5. I said over without much of an issue. And
they're not going to sniff 20,
come close to that. No, they may not get past 10. I mean, some of these teams are, like you said, on pace. Detroit to win 6 games, Washington and San Antonio to win, 10 or 11 games? I mean, that's pathetic. And again, you would think that with load management and the way travel is, and, if you got a long homestand and some teams coming in after they're traveling at the end of a long road trip, that you could sneak some wins in. They can't even get that done. And maybe the one thing that is making it possible for these teams to be this bad is the in-season tournament, where the games they were playing that may have been layups in the past, or maybe some easy wins or possible wins, weren't there because the opposition was all in. So now the teams that are better than them were more competitive. So there weren't these, kind of like sneaky upsets that you would see normally in November and December. So that might explain why these teams are that bad, besides the fact that they just don't have the rosters. Although Cade Cunningham is supposed to be a really good player.
And he's having a good season statistically.
Yeah. I mean, Jaden Ivey, pretty good.
Ivey is good. Sarah Thompson, is having a nice rookie year. Jalen Duren having a nice game, although he's been hurt. Isaiah Stewart, a couple teams are interested in him. Bogdanovich is averaging 20 points a game and is a respected veteran. Like, this team, again, maybe we were overhyping it by saying fringe playoff team, but 2 wins at this point in the season. And Sap, I was looking at their schedule. They're getting annihilated in some of a lot of these games too. It's not like they've been competitive. Look at this. I'm going to read off the amount of points scored by their opponents during this 24-game losing streak, Sap. So bear with me. It's going to be 24 scores, but they're all astronomical. They've given up 124, 110, 125, 120, 120, 120, 114, 119, 126, 108, 142, 107, 136, 126, 133, 118, 110, 116, 123, 131, 129, 124, 146 to the Bucks on Saturday, and then 130 last night to the Hawks. They can't hold teams under 120 points, Sap.
Sounds like my sugar levels being a diabetic. You want to be between like 90 and 120. Well, they're a little bit over that. So they're obviously type 1 or type 2 diabetic at this point with those numbers. Holy crap.
How do you give up 146 points in a regulation NBA game, Sap, to the Bucks? I know the Bucks are good, but I mean, teams should not be putting up 146 points on you.
No, that's 36, 37 points per quarter. They're not playing defense, obviously. They're a young team, so maybe they just haven't bought in. And again, I can't say this enough. Monty Williams signed, a 5-year, $85 million contract to be their head coach. They obviously had to overpay to get him. And then Popovich with San Antonio signed like a 4-year, $68 million extension. I mean, they're paying those two coaches like high-end NFL coaches, let alone NBA coaches, and neither team is a contending team. You could see Steve Kerr making big money or Eric Spoelstra making big money. They've got multiple championships. Those teams, in theory, are contending teams, but Detroit and San Antonio are in rebuild modes, and they're paying their coaches exorbitant amount of money. It's just a real bad look. And it's not good for the league to have like 5 teams that are going to have difficulty breaking double-digit wins all in the same
No,
season. Like you'll see 1, maybe 2 in a given year, but 5? That's horrible.
it's terrible. And they're going through these prolonged losing streaks. Like the Spurs, I think, lost 19 in a row up until they beat your Lakers recently. And like I said, the Pistons are in the midst of that 24-game losing streak. Sap, the Pistons started out in the season 2-1. The last game they won was October 28th. This is the last game they won.
Before Halloween. Yeah.
It's almost Christmas. How is that possible?
And that's a great sports city too, by the way. I mean, but I think it's also a very smart sports city. If you're not good, they won't support you, which is the way it should be. Like, prove to us that you're worth us spending money on. And now we see the Lions are really the big team in Detroit, and the Red Wings have a great fan base. And if the Tigers are good, they'll sell a lot of tickets. Same thing with the Pistons. That's to me, one of the 5 best sports cities in America. And to have a basketball team that bad is really unfortunate.
No, and I think, as we said, Monty Williams is a good coach, and they have talent on their team. You shouldn't. This is giving up. What's happened when you lose 24 games in a row? It's you giving up. You're not putting in effort. It's not a talent question. Talent question is, okay, you didn't make the playoffs. We need to keep getting help in the draft. This is ridiculous. This shouldn't happen to any team. Not in this point in the NBA where there's so much talent in the league. And the same for the Spurs. The Spurs. We're talking about how bad the Pistons are, and you were talking about the Spurs. The Spurs should be not getting any sort of pass either. They have good players. They have the number 1 pick, who's this generational talent. They have Keldon Johnson is a good player. They have decent players on their team. They should not be getting destroyed every single night and going through double-digit losing streaks. And because those teams are so bad, and we'll throw Washington in there too, teams like Memphis and Portland and Charlotte, who are all also awful, are getting a pass because those teams below them are so bad. But Charlotte has 7 wins, Sap. I mentioned Memphis and Portland. They have 6 wins. Those teams suck too. It's the bottom of the league this year is just horrible.
Yeah, really, really bad. I can't recall the last time you had like 6 teams that are that bad that are already eliminated. They're out of playoff contention. And now, obviously, with the play-in tournament, 20 of the 30 teams get to some form of the postseason. I know the play-in tournament is not technically the postseason, but it's extra games. And, I can understand Washington. They seem to be in a full rebuild mode. Portland also supposed to be in a full rebuild
mode. They
mode.
also have good players.
But they do have good players, right? Yeah, I mean, they traded for Rob Williams, who's out for the year. You've got Brogdon, who, can contribute.
Jeremy Grant.
Scoot Henderson's a nice rookie. Yeah, exactly. So they should be better than that. And
what's his name from Phoenix? They got too. That's Ayton. Like they shouldn't be that bad.
Shouldn't be that bad. And I also wonder how much this is denting the legacy of Greg Belichick, the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. I didn't make a mistake there. That was just
I heard it. Yeah,
done intentionally. Same guy, right? We've never seen them in the same room. So, no more Tim Duncan, no more championships, no more Tom Brady, no more championships for Bill Belichick as well. But here's the thing. The Carolina Panthers, who are god-awful in the NFL, have as many wins as the Detroit Pistons.
That's just horrendous. Just horrendous. No, the Pistons, it should be relegated to the G League, and they should call up a G League team. That's how bad if they were to play a G League team right now, they'd lose because they're not trying. So, when you're not trying and you're playing against other professionals, you're going to get your ass kicked. And that's what's happening to them every single night. And I don't know, again, they're going to get a top pick, but they have a bunch of top picks already. How are they going to get better at this point?
Yeah, I mean, that's a team that obviously needs like veteran leadership to maybe push them a bit. Like I always throw this name out there, and obviously he's coaching now, and I think he'll be a fabulous coach. But like a player like Andre Iguodala, who can show the young players how to be professional.
I thought Monty Williams could do that, right?
I guess that's what we thought. I mean, we're both fans of Monty Williams. I thought he did a good job in Phoenix, and then it just kind of blew up. For whatever reason, he didn't get along with Chris Paul after a while, which is not exactly breaking news. At some point, the coach and Chris Paul will feud at some point, but Kevin Durant, it didn't work well with him, so they moved on from him. Respected head coach, you'd think he would get more than this. I mean, this is a disaster.
Yeah, it's awful. And again, with the Wizards, you sort of expected it because they had to make some awful trades because they signed some terrible contracts. The Hornets just don't have that much talent, but like and I've liked what I've seen out of Wembanyama, and we can have a longer discussion on him on a later day. But I know rookies don't affect winning that much. But LeBron also, again, here I am defending LeBron, which I hate, also went to a terrible team, and they didn't make the playoffs, but they weren't nearly this bad. And like it or not, fair or not, that's the level of player Wembanyama is getting compared to. So if you're this generational talent, they should at least win 20 some odd games. They're not on pace for that right now. They're not nearly on pace for that. And so I think it's fair to question, well, what kind of impact is the guy going to have? Is he just going to put up stats and they're going to lose? He needs to affect winning at least occasionally, and that's just not happening.
I think Cleveland more than doubled their win total the year before LeBron to the first year of LeBron. So he had that impact. They kind of contended for a playoff spot and fell just a little bit short. And that happened also in the second year. But by the third
and that
year,
roster sucked, by the way.
Oh, that
LeBron's
roster was
first year
horrible.
Awful.
You could make a case his first 7 years in Cleveland, the roster was horrible. Like, who was his best teammate? Monty
Ilgauskas.
Mo Williams. Ilgauskas, who, looked 47 years old at the time, and Mo Williams. Mo Williams was a decent guard, who I think made the All-Star team one time because they had the best record in the conference. So, yeah, that first go-around in Cleveland, the roster was terrible. He got them to the playoffs constantly, got them to the finals. Obviously we're talking about, in my opinion, the greatest player ever. But, yeah, that's what you would expected Wembanyama to do because LeBron came right out of high school. Wembanyama played 1 year professionally, or at least at the highest level professionally in France, which is a really good league. A little older than LeBron when he came to the league, so you would think he'd be ready-made to contribute more, and he's played well, but it just doesn't seem like his teammates quite understand what to do with him, right? It's almost like they kind of stand around and watch him. And again, that's where you need veteran players to kind of set the locker room straight. A coach can only do so much. You need that veteran presence that can say, look, we've got this incredible talent. Let's use them correctly. Let's, be serious about this. We're professionals here. And that veteran player, and again, Andre Iguodala, pick whoever, can be that type of player. Now, Iguodala is now into coaching. And like I said, he's going to be fabulous at whatever he does. But that's what you really need with these young teams, because you can't just have a bunch of young guys. It's not going to work. You need something in there to guide them besides the coaching staff.
Yeah, I think and that kind of real quickly, I think that's what Houston did in free agency. They signed Fred VanVleet. They signed Dillon Brooks. Well, like Dillon Brooks or not, he's a veteran. And listen, it's not like they're blowing the world, lighting the world on fire, but they've been way, way improved from last year. 13-11, they'd be in the play-in right now. They're only 2 games or a game back, a half game back of the Lakers. So that I think, Sap, there's a lot of value into what you're saying. They don't even have to be necessarily those high price guys like VanVleet and Brooks, were just guys who have been around the league and know how to play. But no, for San Antonio, for Washington, Detroit, and specifically Detroit and Washington, they have absolutely no excuse to be this bad. It reflects poorly on the entire organization and on the coach and on the players. Other teams are looking at these guys and saying, and when they become free agents, they're going to say, we don't want anything to do with these guys. They're not going to put in effort. When the going gets bad, they're going to quit. That's not a good look.
No, not at all. It's bad for the league too, because you're coming off the in-season tournament, which was really a great thing for the league. You've got a nice group of games on Christmas Day, although they'll be overshadowed by 3 NFL games. But still, good things going on with the
break
NBA.
For the league that lined up with the NFL.
You could have put Carolina against the Patriots on Christmas Day, and it would outdraw the NBA, which just tells you how popular the NFL is. But yeah, good things for the NBA. But you got Draymond Green cold cocking people, and now you've got 5 or 6 teams that look like they've already given up, and it's not even Christmas.
Yeah, it's not great. We got about 2 minutes left, Sap. So before we wrap up, I know the Lakers hung a new banner for the in-season tournament. So quickly, Sap, were you pro or against hanging the banner?
Well, I mean, at first you're like, really, a franchise with 17 championships is going to hang this banner? But I think to sell the in-season tournament, it's a good thing to hang the banner, because the banner is transferable. So next year, when whoever wins it gets the banner, kind of like the Stanley Cup. So if that's the case, then
I don't think it is.
It's not? Okay, well, I made that up. So, maybe I could send that to Adam Silver to make sure the Lakers don't look so bad.
I actually think that's a better idea to do it.
That is a better idea. Yeah, transferable banner, so it's not up there permanently. But I think to sell this, they kind of had to do it, and I think this is all tied into LeBron wanting to have ownership of a team in Las Vegas. He did the commissioner a solid by being all in on this. The Lakers won it. The commissioner appreciates that. He wants the banner hung up in LA since they won it, and at some point there'll be payback for LeBron to get that expansion franchise in Las Vegas. So if you're trying to sell it, yes, this is probably the right thing to do, but I'm sure Celtic fans are apoplectic about this because they're saying we would never do this or you would never do this. I'm not a Celtic fan, but yeah, well, if you won it, then you could have had that decision made, but you didn't win it. So
I know fans in LA cheered it. I honestly believe that if they tried to hang in Boston, the fans would have booed it. Maybe I'm being too optimistic about Celtics fans.
Current Celtic fans? Oh no,
yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, you guys are all wearing.
I would have booed
glasses.
it. I would have personally booed it.
You would have been drowned out by 18,000.
You're probably right.
7 green teamers there. Chris Forsberg and the rest of you guys. And I love Chris Forsberg. He's my guy. But I do think Celtics fans have become soft, considering it's a franchise that's won 17 championships. The only problem is most of the Celtic fans have only seen one of them, maybe two.
That's true.
It's been a while.
Yeah, well, that's going to do it for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Thanks for full press coverage. Go check out their website. Check out our socials at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. We'll be back after the new year as I'm going on a trip with some new content. So we'll have plenty to talk about. Have a happy holidays, everybody. Happy holidays, Sap. And we'll talk to you later. See you, everybody.